Newark International Airport, February 24th, 1996. Millionaire businessman Frank Black boards a flight bound for West Palm Beach, Florida. His family and friends never see him again. Frank Black simply vanishes into thin air. Investigators suspect the worst.
It's your ancient motivations for murder. It's hatred, it's anger, and it's greed.
This was about as difficult a case as you could get. There's no body. It was a DNA wasteland.
This was a tough crime. This was a no-body murder case. Extremely tough.
And there's a perception among people that if you don't have a body, you don't have a case.
Black's disappearance evolves into a massive multi-state investigation spanning thousands of miles. It's an investigation with no body, no murder weapon, and no eyewitnesses. Determining Frank Black's final moments and proving that he was murdered will challenge investigators to the core. The mystery of Frank Black's disappearance begins at the Newark Airport. Acting on a missing persons report, police find Black's car exactly where they expect to. There are no signs of damage and no signs of foul play. FBI Special Agent John Turkington heads up the investigation.
The first information that we got regarding the disappearance of Frank Black was a contact by one of his daughters, Leanna. She was quite concerned because she hadn't heard from him. It was very much out of his character not to stay in touch with her as well as her sister, Diane, on a regular basis.
Turkington learns Black is a man with two passions, his school bus business and his daughters. He learns that Black left New Jersey to look into a business deal in Florida. He was only supposed to be gone for one night, but he never came back home. His daughters are terrified something has happened to their father. Busing is in the Black family blood, specifically school buses. Frank Black's family has been transporting school children for over 30 years. Under Frank's leadership, the company has made him millions. The workaholic, hands-on busing chief was going to close one last deal in Florida before retiring to enjoy his success. Agent Turkington's first task is to pick up on Black's trail and figure out who would want him to vanish.
We had determined that the purpose of the business trip was to meet with a woman by the name of Giordano. She had made a series of phone calls to the business over the week before Frank Black left, and she had told Frank that she wanted to discuss the sale of school buses. She had told him that she had seen a sticker with his company name on it in Florida and liked the product and represented a company from South America that wanted to buy 60 of these school vehicles for export to South America. Now, this would have been the biggest contract that Frank Black ever had.
Giordano becomes Turkington's elusive white rabbit.
The information that came in regarding Mia Giordano, she was kind of a mystery woman. When she called the business, she would never leave a callback number. She would never identify who she represented, what business she worked for, or anything like that. So we had no identifying information.
For Turkington, Giordano is nothing but a name. He and his team work the phones and pore over telephone records, searching for any sign of one Mia Giordano. Whoever she is, her name doesn't register with any FBI database. In the hunt to find Mia Giordano, investigators turn to Frank Black's phone call verbatims. The verbatims are records which trace the origin of phone calls Black received on those critical days just before he disappeared. Jackpot. A pattern emerges. Dozens of calls to Black came from 2 locations around St. Lucie, Florida. If investigators are going to find Frank Black, signs point south to Florida.
When the telephone record showed that the calls from Mia Giordano had originated from Florida, we got in touch with the FBI office down there. They contacted the sheriff's offices as well as the FDLE, and they started a parallel investigation regarding all the events that had taken place in Florida, trying to retrace Frank Black's steps from the time he got off the plane in West Palm to the time that he disappeared.
Turkington hands FDLE Special Agent Mike Driscoll the reins as lead investigator on a mysterious disappearance case.
Well, it's not uncommon for people to come down to Florida, particularly during the winter, for vacation. And in my experience, it's further not uncommon for people to want to disappear for a few days. I was kind of hoping that was the case.
An impulsive disappearance is out of character for Black. But Turkington passes Driscoll a tantalizing lead.
One of the things that we wanted to know was who this woman was and how Frank was going to hook up with her in West Palm Beach, Florida. What he had told a couple of his friends was that she had described herself as 5 foot tall, blonde, mostly legs, and she'll be the hottest thing at the airport, which Frank kind of laughed about with his friends, but he seemed to be looking forward to this meeting at the airport with her.
Driscoll's first order of business is to track down Mia Giordano. Whoever she is, she's the key link to finding Frank Black. "5 feet tall, blonde, mostly legs, and extremely hot. This is all Agent Driscoll has on the mysterious Mia Giordano. Working from the phone company records, he and his surveillance team zero in on 2 key locations. Locations of repeated calls to Frank Black in the days leading up to his disappearance.
Well, at least it's a good area to be sitting.
Locations that should lead them to Mia Giordano.
I think we got movement there.
We were able to identify the source of those telephone calls as Lisa Costello's apartment in Jupiter and Alan Mackerly's residence here in Stewart.
Costello and Mackerly, brand new names for Agent Driscoll.
Well, the surveillance activities that we initially conducted showed that vehicles listed to Alan Mackerly and/or Lisa Costello were at both residences. So the investigation clearly showed that Mackerly and Costello had a relationship. They were like boyfriend and girlfriend.
Yeah, Mia, at least it's the same one. You're getting this right?
Yeah.
So we were able to determine, obviously, that the 2 were, for the most part, living together at Mackerly's residence in Stewart.
The discovery is a huge step forward for Agent Driscoll. Now he knows Mia Giordano does in fact exist. Mia is an alias. Her real name is Lisa Costello. He also knows the 2 homes and 2 players are intimately connected. A background check on Alan Mackerly reveals he's also from New Jersey, and also in the school bus business. Over the past couple of decades, his company has made him millions. But recently, Mackerly has been working less and spending more time living the good life in Florida. He has a $300,000 speedboat, a $500,000 yacht, a Cessna airplane, a beautiful beach house, a nightclub, and a reputation as a playboy.
Alan Mackerly was a longtime friend of Frank Black. Frank Black was actually his mentor in the bus business. They had known each other for over 40 years. And in fact, Alan Mackerly had introduced Frank Black's wife to him many years ago. But over the years, that personal relationship deteriorated when the business relationship crossed over. There was fierce competition among the bus companies. And in the last few years, there had been accusations that Frank Black had been bad-mouthing Alan Mackerly to other municipalities that were looking for school bus contracts. The one event that brought things to a head was a bus contract in a town in Morris County that formerly belonged to Alan Mackerly. Frank Black had underbid him and won the contract, and this greatly angered Mackerly.
The plush Morris County contract is worth over $100,000 in annual profit. Sources tell Turkington that losing the contract infuriated Mackerly. But did it drive him to commit murder? Florida detective Mike Driscoll decides it's time for a face-to-face with Mackerly.
Hi, Alan Mackerly?
Yeah.
Mike Driscoll.
On this first meeting, Driscoll plays his cards close to his chest.
I haven't heard or seen from Frank in months.
He tells Mackerly they're investigating Frank Black's disappearance, and they're also looking for a woman named Mia, who's in the busing industry.
A lady in the busing industry? There are no ladies in the busing industry. There's middle linebackers in the busing industry.
Okay, well, if you do hear from
We didn't ask him any hard questions because we knew. We obviously clearly knew from the phone records that he had had contact with him. And we didn't want to tip our hand to him that we knew that the phone calls had come from his house. So we at least had to give him the chance to say right up front, yes, Frank Black was here, or I met with Frank Black in Florida, and he left, and I don't know where he is. Had he said that, it may have changed the course of this investigation.
Appreciate it. You have yourself a good day.
"7 days after leaving New Jersey, there are no signs of Frank Black. Driscoll still has zero proof that Black's even dead. He orders police to scour all West Palm Beach car rental agencies, looking for any link. Investigators hit upon a major coincidence. At 6:16 p.m. on February 24th, Lisa Costello rented a car from the Airport Hertz dealership. If Driscoll can show Black was in that car, he can tie Costello to the disappearance. The rental car is hauled in for a thorough forensic examination, but Driscoll is too late.
The vehicle had already been cleaned out 3 or 4 times, and we didn't find any forensic evidence, but it did show the unusual rental of a vehicle on the date of the disappearance of Frank Black.
The car is a dead end. Repeated cleanings have destroyed any fingerprints, fibers, or DNA that may have been there. A search for Black's body at all medical examiners' offices up and down the Florida coastline comes back negative. All signs of Frank Black peter out at the West Palm Beach Airport. In his quest to nail down a link between his key suspects and the victim, Driscoll calls in an old friend from the FBI. Special Agent Jay Miller. One of Miller's tasks is to try and piece together Mackerly's timeline around the disappearance, see if there was anything interesting he did around the 24th. He strikes pay dirt when poring over Mackerly's credit card records.
I found that shortly after the disappearance of Frank Black, Alan had made a couple of purchases at a Walmart and a Kmart store in Stuart, Florida. I went to those stores and found that, in fact, Alan had purchased large quantities of cleaning supplies.
Cleaning supplies that hint at some sort of cover-up. After weeks of grueling legwork, Driscoll still has no hard evidence. A few credit card and telephone records aren't enough to make a case against the wealthy playboy.
Okay. Now listen, here's what I want you to do. You call him. Okay, use a fictitious name.
Every bone in his body tells him Frank Black has been murdered, and Alan Mackerly did it. All Driscoll has to do now is prove it. After dozens of interviews, numerous surveillance ops, and hundreds of man-hours spent on wiretaps, Agent Driscoll and his team still lack sufficient evidence to prove Alan and Lisa are behind Frank's demise. Bob Belanger is Assistant State's Attorney for Martin County.
The investigation seemed to be going nowhere. We had suspicions that Alan Mackerly was involved in the disappearance of Frank Black, but we didn't have enough evidence to make an arrest, and certainly didn't have enough evidence to prove that he committed murder beyond a reasonable doubt. And I remember in May 1996, as we were shutting down the wiretap, Dave Morgan and I had a conversation about what the next step was in the investigation. And we were both very dejected, and David Morgan said to me, it looks like he got away with murder.
Criminal lawyer Paul Morris calls it a rush to judgment.
There's a theme running through this case, and it's an explanation for how the prosecutors went wrong. And that is, they put Alan Mackerly in their crosshairs. They targeted Alan Mackerly. They were convinced that he was responsible for Frank Black's disappearance.
In the hunt for more information, Driscoll turns to Mackerly's best friend, former Marine pilot Bill Anderson.
Hello.
Driscoll wagers that Anderson knows something, and that as a Marine, his sense of honor would compel him to tell the truth, especially if he was dealing with fellow Marines.
When Jay Miller and I first met Bill Anderson, we probably spent the first 45 minutes of that interview talking about the Marine Corps.
I was in the Marine Corps. Mike Driscoll was in the Marine Corps. The prosecutor on the case, Bob Belanger, was in the Marine Corps. And we sort of bonded. We developed a trust. And I think Bill knew that he could trust us. We pledged our trust to him. We told Bill, look, we think you know more. We want to know what you know.
Bill Anderson knows exactly what happened to Frank Black.
Bill Anderson said that Mackerly had told him that he and Lisa had lured Frank Black down from New Jersey to West Palm Beach.
How he had taken Frank and had him in a headlock and taken a gun and placed it to his head and shot him.
And that occurred in the front hallway.
Go and get the tarp.
He further stated that, there was a lot of blood all over the place. And that he eventually wrapped the body in a tarp and brought it out to sea in his boat and dumped the body in the ocean.
And he figures he's going to kill him, and he's going to kill him in a place where he can easily dispose of his body. He's got the means. He's got a fast boat in an isolated residence right off the ocean. And so he's got all of this set up. Because he thought, as he had indicated to Bill Anderson, no body, no crime.
Apparently, when he got back to his house over the next day, he became concerned that the body may be floating or have resurfaced. And so he called Bill Anderson, who is a former Marine pilot and the pilot of Mackerly's plane, and asked Bill to go out and help him locate the body to see if it was floating.
And that was the initial confession by Alan Mackerly to Bill Anderson. It was over the telephone.
Driscoll finally knows where to search for signs of new evidence. Signs to prove that Frank Black's disappearance was a murder. Driscoll calls in the forensics unit to process Mackerly's home. It's been months since Black's disappearance. Detective Sergeant Grady Shirk is leader of Martin County's elite forensic unit.
Visually speaking, when we entered the house, it just looked like a normal house. There were no signs of blood or force or stress or anything. We photographed the residence, took videotaping of the residence, and then attempted to pick up the leads that we have and start piecing this together.
CSIs will do whatever it takes in the search for evidence.
We'll get that off.
Detective Shirk knows that Mackerly has had months to clean up after the killing. Though Mackerly totally remodeled the front foyer, clues could still be hiding beneath the surface.
When a crime scene is cleaned extensively, the evidence just doesn't jump out at you, and you have to go in search of every little forensic hair and fiber and a little speck of blood.
All right, let's hope this is it. That's all we got.
Blood, however, doesn't always disappear. It can seep through floors and carpets deep into the subfloor. Any spatter cast off can find its way into unseen cracks and crevices. Shirk zeroes in on the terrazzo floor. If any blood made its way into the marble, chemicals like luminol will react with the iron in the blood, causing it to light up and glow.
And there was a small spot in that front hallway about the size of a dinner plate where in this terrazzo, in the cracks of the terrazzo, the aggregate between the rocks and the terrazzo, you had this almost spiderweb type luminol glow. And so we were quite excited about the prospect of getting DNA from that location in the home.
Finally, it seems Mackerly has slipped up. A chunk of flooring is removed and sent to the lab for more precise blood and DNA testing.
It was our expectation that the crime lab would then issue an analysis that would make the connection between Frank Black and the crime scene, because in this particular case, those two issues should have never come together.
But when the results come back from the lab, the case takes another turn. The house is a major disappointment. STR test results of stain 3 from the terrazzo floor indicate a positive match for human DNA. But the DNA is from a female. It's certainly not DNA from Frank Black.
After Mr. Mackerly had killed Frank Black, there was a considerable amount of blood in that front hallway, and he spent a considerable amount of time and effort cleaning up that front hallway, ripping out the carpeting, ripping out the drywall, buying cleaning supplies, and creating a veritable DNA wasteland.
When Lisa Costello is hauled in for questioning, she clams up and maintains her silence. She's thrown in jail in contempt of court in violation of an investigative subpoena. Is she protecting her rich boyfriend, or is she protecting herself? Tom Bacadol is assistant state attorney working the case with Bob Belanger.
Had we gotten into the house the day after Frank Black arrived in West Palm Beach, we'd have had blood spatter on walls, we'd have had blood in carpet, we'd have had forensic evidence, and we'd have had a body probably if we had gotten there sooner. But we didn't, because the cops can't read minds and we can't predict the future. He was able to clean up and he was able to dispose of evidence.
Criminal lawyer Paul Morris doesn't buy it.
So you have to ask yourself, how could someone like Alan Mackerly know how to clean a crime scene to such a degree that there wouldn't be even any microscopic details of Frank Black's blood? How would anyone be able to do that? The point is, it can't be done. And the reason why there was no DNA of Frank Black at the scene is because it didn't occur that way. It's because Alan Mackerly wasn't there when Frank Black met his death.
But investigators are certain Mackerly is behind the disappearance and murder of Frank Black. The original blood-soaked drywall and carpeting from the house are long gone. This is the evidence Driscoll must somehow find to stop his case from imploding. With no hard evidence of Frank Black's blood inside Mackerly's home, Driscoll and Shirk turn their effort to the county dump. According to informant Bill Anderson, everything Mackerly used to clean up the kill zone was sent here. Somewhere beneath the mounds of earth and garbage lay the debris from the front hallway.
In that search, we were looking for anything and everything, from carpet to carpet strips to vacuum cleaners, drywall, 2x4s, anything that may turn up biological leads.
The dump covers over 400 acres. Sifting through it is an impossible task. But the CSIs have an inside scoop. At this dump, every truck coming in is charted and assigned a designated spot for offloading. Mackerly's dated dump receipts can be used to help pinpoint exactly where he dumped his garbage. Pat Graham is the landfill superintendent.
So that dumping area would be maybe 100 feet wide by 50 feet long, and a day's worth of waste maybe 10 or 12 feet deep. If you dump something today and you came back to me in 6 months and wanted to know approximately where, if you wanted to dig it up, we could find it, we could locate that area.
After days of digging, success. Carpeting with dark red stains, visually matching to Mackerly's.
It did create a lot of excitement. There was good days and bad days.
And it was a long shot, and when we did find what we thought were the vacuum cleaners in the carpeting, we were pretty happy about it.
I mean, for crying out loud, the man ripped out walls, carpeting, perfectly good vacuum cleaners, too, and threw them in the dump. Now, why do you do that?
Chemical testing at the lab should confirm the reddish stains are in fact Frank Black's blood. Serologist Vivian Armstrong inherits the task of processing the carpets.
And so I went through this carpeting, which was dirty, smelly, stained, just unbelievably filthy and smelly, and did KM testing on the top of all of the pieces of carpeting and on the bottom of all of the pieces of carpeting, and I found no evidence of blood.
After an entire day of testing, the carpets do not yield a single positive result. Once again, the forensics fail Agent Driscoll.
It's very interesting what happened with the search of the dump site. What happens when that carpeting is sent to the lab for DNA testing? No blood. And that sort of just quietly disappeared from the prosecution's arsenal, as did so many other things that didn't fit into their theory of the case. And the reason why all these square pegs don't fit in these round holes is because the prosecution has it wrong.
In the hunt for hard physical evidence, Shirk and Driscoll turn next to Mackerly's boats.
Bill Anderson, in his statement to us, he informed us that Alan Mackerly had taken Frank Black's dead body on his boat, went out the St. Lucie Inlet and approximately between 12 and 20 miles out into the Atlantic Ocean and dumped the body.
We were able to determine that our find of specific evidence items appeared to be significant. We had blood stains on carpet, we had blood stains on fabric and walls. So our finding of the evidence was quite pleasing. And as a result, we were hoping the crime lab would come back with a lab report that would show the connection between Frank Black and this boat.
But once again, lab tests on the samples come back inconclusive. Cleaning chemicals found mixed in with the reddish liquid have contaminated the evidence so much, lab techs can't even tell if the blood is human.
But one interesting thing that the individual from Florida Department of Law Enforcement found was that when she examined the spot on the carpet, it appeared to have been clean. Now, it doesn't take a genius to figure out if the guy is willing to rip out drywall, tear up carpeting, throw away vacuum cleaners, paint, and do everything that he did, he wouldn't take an extra few minutes to scrub down the carpet in the boat that he transported the body in. So I think that was a pretty important little piece of evidence from a forensic perspective that we're able to rely upon.
Investigators uncover more clues in the boat's electronic navigational gear. A GPS waypoint confirms the boat was out 16 miles south-southeast of the St. Lucie buoy. This is exactly where informant Bill Anderson told investigators Mackerly said he dumped the body. Forensic divers head out to open water in search of Black's body. There's little hope of recovering it. The area, nicknamed the Desert of the Ocean, is shark-infested and 900 feet deep. Chances are Black's body never even made it close to the sea floor. With no body and no smoking gun, Driscoll does not give up. His team hatches a sting operation in hopes of getting a confession. Mackerly may appear to have the upper hand, but Driscoll wagers he can still be caught. Mackerly confessed to Anderson once. Maybe his best friend can get him to confess again. August 29th, 1996. Agents from the FBI, FDLE, and Martin County Sheriff's Office wire Bill Anderson and his home in hopes of catching Mackerly's confession on tape. It's a risky operation. If Mackerly suspects Anderson of crossing him, there's no telling how he may react.
The plan was to have Mr. Mackerly come over to Bill Anderson's house, sit down at the kitchen table across from Mr. Anderson, looking directly into that camera that was hidden in the radio, and have a conversation about the murder.
We're right there, you know. Okay, don't be too obvious about everything that you're doing. Okay, make sure that
We had Alan Mackerly under surveillance with surveillance teams on the ground and an aircraft. We knew his whereabouts, we knew what he was doing.
No way to do this without me.
He already was suspected of murdering one man in cold blood. Who's to say that when he's looking at an imminent arrest or a friend who's now providing evidence on him, that how he could react?
We had one individual, Mike Driscoll, secreted in a closet near the area where the recording was occurring, just in the event we had any problems.
At approximately 11 a.m., the aerial surveillance team trails Mackerly to Anderson's house. The trap is set and ready to catch a killer.
I prepared a list of topics for Anderson to discuss with Mackerly. And these topics, again, were ones that I thought would obtain statements without scaring Mackerly off. And that's what we did. And Bill would throw out different ideas to Mackerly, and Mackerly would respond.
Stay, Lucky. Stay. How you doing? Good to see you.
You're a big guy. Good to see you.
Coffee? Okay. Your friend Mike Driscoll was here this morning.
He gave it to you this morning?
Yep.
Just like today?
Yes. They came in, he and the FBI guy.
Uh-huh. Miller?
Uh-huh. Look, I got, what, 3 choices. Listen to me. I got 3 choices. I leave the country, okay? Or I go to jail with Lisa, and Driscoll threatened that when he walked out the door today, okay? He says, you pull what Lisa did, you'll follow her right into the Martin County Jail. And the other thing I'm gonna do is lie, okay?
And when he was there with Bill Anderson, He was extremely paranoid. In fact, at one point, he leaned over to Bill and said, "Shh, they're outside. They're there now." And in fact, we were there.
Alan, have you told anybody that you told me?
Never.
Never. You sure? Because that, look, you understand that if somebody comes out of the woodwork, nobody can hear us. There's nobody here. Well, close it then. Never what? I can't hear you. What do you want me to do?
During that covert taping, I mean, he was very, very nervous when the subject of Frank Black was brought up, whispering, uttering. He wouldn't even discuss it inside the residence. They actually walked outside. Fortunately, we had a recording device secreted on Bill Anderson's body.
Well, I sure hope you covered up. Did the credit cards go down? No, Frank. All right, I'll go lie. I'll do it. But I want you to know I'm scared shitless.
We were hoping for a home run, and ultimately, after we reviewed the tape and the transcript, we said it wasn't a home run, but it was a stand-up triple. We're pretty happy with what we got. And quite frankly, anytime Tom and I would get dejected or despair about the case, we would pop in that videotape, watch it, and then say, this is a great case.
Alan Mackerly's days as a wealthy playboy are about to come to an end. August 29th, 1996, 5:08 p.m. After 6 months of exhausting and sometimes trying investigation, Agent Driscoll finally has his moment.
And Alan had come out of his house walking his dog, and at that point he was approached by law enforcement, arrested, handcuffed, and taken to jail. Period.
7825, code 6, 105
Okay, let's go again.
And I honestly believe in my own mind that it took the best of the best to bring this man to justice. It was a fight, it was a battle. We worked for every inch we gained in this case, we worked for it. It was endless hours, a life of its own.
The hunt for Frank Black's killer is over. But with no smoking gun, no body, and no eyewitnesses, can the prosecution's case stand up in a court of law?
This is a case where there's no body. This is a case where there's no murder weapon. This is a case where there's no DNA that would connect Alan Mackerly to the murder. This is a case where we submit there is no motive, certainly no believable motive, no reason in the world why someone like Alan Mackerly in his position would murder Frank Black. The case is at best a wholly circumstantial evidence case, and the case is riddled with reasonable doubt.
Heading into trial, Mackerly's high-powered lawyers introduce a counter-theory. The prosecution has it all wrong. Alan didn't kill Frank Black. Lisa Costello did. After months of investigation, Alan Mackerly goes on trial for the murder of Frank Black.
Let me tell you, the truth is immutable. But what the truth is, ladies and gentlemen, is that this man, Alan Mackerly, is a murderer.
The busing tycoon admits he and his girlfriend conspired to draw Black into a bogus business deal. But Mackerly claims he never wanted Black to come to Florida. Mackerly says all he was trying to do with the phone calls was find out more about Black's company so he could try and buy him out.
Alan Mackerly was not there when the event happened. All he was able to relate to the jury was what Lisa Costello told him. Lisa Costello said she was alone with Frank Black in Alan Mackerly's house, and that Frank Black, when he discovered it was Alan Mackerly's house, attacked Lisa Costello, and she defended herself by striking him over the head with a dumbbell from the weight room, and she killed him.
Mackerly says he cleaned up his house and covered up for Lisa because he loved her. He did it to protect her, but he had nothing to do with the dumping of Frank Black's body. Prosecutor Bob Belanger doesn't buy it.
Do we know exactly what happened minute to minute? No, we never know exactly what happened in a murder case. We don't have to prove a case beyond all doubt. We don't have to answer every question. We just have to prove the elements of the crime beyond a reasonable doubt. But certainly, Lisa Costello didn't know Frank Black, didn't dislike him, would have no motive to kill him. Alan Mackerly was the driving force behind this.
When Costello learns her boyfriend is blaming her for Frank's murder, she breaks her silence. After sitting in jail for months, she's now ready to talk. Costello cops to bringing Black to Mackerly's house, but that's it. She had no idea Alan was going to shoot him. She pleads no contest to false imprisonment and manslaughter charges and receives 10 years in exchange for her testimony.
Alan and Lisa devised a scheme to entice Frank Black to fly from New Jersey to Florida. Now, once he got to Florida and the exact nature of how the murder came down, there are only two people that know how Frank Black died that night in Alan's house, Lisa Costello and Alan Mackerly. I believe that Alan enticed Frank Black to Florida with the intention of murdering him just as he did. And I'll believe that forever.
In lie and to cover, correct?
Correct. At this first trial, Mackerly is found guilty for the murder and kidnapping of Frank Black and sentenced to life in prison. But his lawyers win an appeal on grounds contesting the kidnapping charge. The case goes to a second trial, which results in a hung jury.
And so I'm going to declare a mistrial in this case. And
a lone dissenter can't imagine Mackerly is the kind of man who would kill. But Belanger refuses to give up. He takes the case to the Supreme Court of Florida, and in early March 2003, a third jury finds Alan Mackerly guilty for the first-degree murder of Frank Black.
12 jurors who heard the case the first time found him guilty. 11 out of 12 jurors the second time found him guilty, and 12 out of 12 the third time found him guilty. So the idea that we didn't have a body, we don't have DNA, we don't have a murder weapon, that all initially causes concern, but you really have to look at the totality of the case and how all the evidence fits together, and it really is a compelling case when all is said and done.
I've been in law enforcement 25 years now. Of my 25, this case has gone on for almost a third of it. So in terms of its length and duration, nothing else comes close.
This is a very sad case. The family lost a father and now a grandfather. So we all grieve for the family in this case. But from a law enforcement standpoint, we have to look at this as a success.
Mackerly's lawyer, Paul Morris, sees the case quite differently. He's launching an appeal for a fourth trial.
Alan Mackerly will never give up hope that the truth will come out. He'll never give up hope that Lisa Costello will come forward and exonerate him, and will never give up hope that ongoing investigations will help to confirm that his testimony has always been the truth.
This case is not about who Alan Mackerly is, because we all know now that Alan Mackerly is a murderer. This case was about who was Frank Black and what brought him to this, crossroads of his life.
Lisa Costello is due to be released from prison shortly. Her former boyfriend is currently serving a life sentence and is ineligible for parole. While the New Jersey busing tycoon sits in jail, His company continues to earn millions, busing children to school.
February 5th, 2002, Hudson, Wisconsin. A shocking double murder triggers the town's first homicide case in nearly a quarter century. For two rookie cops, it's a baptism by fire.
My first thoughts were, this just can't be real.
Shot execution style, no motive whatsoever.
With little evidence left behind and no eyewitnesses,
We had absolutely nothing to go on.
everyone is a suspect.
I had a certain sense of an Agatha Christie sort of thing.
And the small town is suddenly thrust into a real-life mystery.
Are these guys that mad, that angry, that they would actually commit murder?
Driven by the cold logic of forensic science, investigators tackle unspeakable secrets, uncover impossible truths, and struggle to answer one burning question.
Who wanted him dead?
Hudson, Wisconsin, an otherwise charming riverside town, a place where big city worries seem a distant reality. But on February 5th, 2002, at 1:40 p.m., all that changes when police receive a 911 call from the O'Connell Funeral Home. Within minutes, the emergency response unit is on the scene. Tipped off that a killer is on the loose, they search the building room by room.
We had a police scanner running at the time. We could hear the emergency response team was on a channel and they were talking about being in the building. You could hear them talking real soft. So we knew they were in there and they were looking to see if somebody was still in there.
But the killer is long gone.
And the word came across the scanner, bodies found.
And with that grim discovery, at 2:27 p.m., the building is finally declared clear. The focus now is on the murder investigation. Leading the charge are rookie detectives Sean Petit and Jeff Knopf. The young policemen stop dead in their tracks when they recognize one of the victims.
The fact that made it extremely disturbing was that it was Dan O'Connell, somebody that I knew well, a very close friend.
Dan O'Connell is the director of the funeral home and from one of the town's most prominent families.
And now he's gone by somebody shooting him.
This just can't be real. It can't be. To see somebody that you've grown up with deceased, I couldn't believe it.
The second victim is James Ellison, a mortuary science intern from the University of Minnesota at River Falls.
Well, this kid was just, he was squeaky clean. Oh Lord, you couldn't ask for a happier, kid, and everybody loved him.
I hadn't witnessed a homicide ever. It was a very disturbing crime scene, to say the least.
Both victims were killed by a single bullet to the head, in classic execution style. For the young detectives, the brutality of the murder scene is made all the worse by their personal ties with Dan O'Connell.
There was a time that I had to step away from the crime scene and shed a tear or two. But on the flip side, I knew that, it was a task that I had to complete. I was bound and determined to do whatever I could to find out who did this to him.
But the crime scene raises more questions than it answers. The only things out of place are papers James Ellison appears to have been carrying when he was shot.
Absolutely no struggle whatsoever. The coats were still hung on the back of the chairs. The phone itself was still standing in an upright position on his desk. That wasn't even knocked over. Nothing disturbed in the office or throughout the funeral home.
Why didn't the victims try to defend themselves? The lack of a struggle is baffling and leads to various theories.
Were they both in the office at the same time? Was this a murder-suicide?
Possibly the two of them had an argument, but there was no weapon at the scene.
With the absence of a gun, investigators quickly dismiss the murder-suicide theory.
Perhaps this was a robbery, but there was nothing missing from the funeral home. There was ample opportunity to take the wallet from James Ellison.
But the crime scene provides investigators with little evidence.
In this case, about the only thing that was left there were 3 shell casings.
Police look to the 9mm shell casings to help unravel the crime. Using a dowel and string, they chart the trajectory of a shot from its casing on the floor to where the bullet was found lodged behind a shattered picture. A closer examination of James' body reveals a small wound on his left hand.
Perhaps the very first shot that was taken at James was a miss. The shot entered his pinky and it startled him, and he essentially dropped his folders,
explaining the scattered papers on the floor. Investigators find the next shell casing on the chair, under James Ellison's body.
The spent casing on the chair indicated that Dan O'Connell was shot at about a 45-degree angle behind his desk.
Detectives reason that the remaining casing on the floor near the desk is from the shot that killed James point blank. In both cases, the entry wounds placed the shooter no further than 5 feet from the victims.
It appeared that a person entered the funeral home that Dan knew, that this was a surprise attack.
I think it was a very good shot and very calculated.
The person knew exactly where a good shot placement would essentially kill them.
Detectives wonder if they're chasing a skilled marksman. Knowing how quickly word spreads in a small town, police keep all gathered information under lock and key.
They kept a very tight lid on this thing.
Equally important is finding a motive for the killings.
What made this case unique from anything else was the fact that we had 2 victims. We didn't know if the target was James Ellison or Dan O'Connell. We dug into Dan's background and James's background as thorough as one could, and we just came up with absolutely no motive whatsoever.
That these 2 men didn't appear to have any outside enemies.
James was just an ordinary, happy-go-lucky college student that had a bright future in the mortician business.
We could find no reason for him being killed.
Eliminating James as a possible target, detectives shift their focus to Dan O'Connell. As a deeply involved member of his community, he appeared to be loved by all. But was he?
We're probably looking for a person who knew Dan, who had something to do with Dan, something that Dan knew that we had to find out. What did he know that caused this to happen?
But locals can't possibly believe anyone living in Hudson is capable of such violence.
There was certainly a desire on the community's part to have this be from somebody from the outside. I mean, I think that would be the case with anyone who was murdered here, but because it was the O'Connells on top of it, people just didn't believe they had enemies of that sort.
But this was more something that was up close and personal.
You have to start working close to the victims, work your way out. Family, friends, acquaintances. The person who did it had to know one or both of them.
And so detectives begin the delicate task of questioning one of their closest friends.
Hi, Jenny.
Hi, Sean.
Do you mind if we come in?
No, not at all.
Thanks.
Dan O'Connell's wife, Jenny.
No, I'm not stupid. Well, of course, the first person you look at is, you know, the spouse.
I know this is difficult, but I'm gonna have to ask you some real personal questions, okay?
Of course. I want to know who killed my husband.
Who could have shot him? Everyone liked him. Who wanted him dead?
A prominent funeral home owner and his apprentice have been shot in cold blood by an unknown killer. The first homicides to hit Hudson, Wisconsin in over 20 years leave the small town stunned and reaching for answers.
Who would ever dream of coming in and shooting Dan O'Connell? I mean, a very well-respected person in the community, father of two, wonderful husband, and just a great friend to everybody. It was a shock.
The search for a motive is critical and drives the early days of the investigation, turning everyone in town into a suspect.
As it's always said, the nearest and dearest.
Knops and Petit start by questioning Dan's wife, Jenny O'Connell.
Personal questions, okay?
It was awful tough for me, being a personal friend of Jenny, to ask her very personal questions, from sex life to financial end of it. Jenny knew that I had a job to do.
Jenny, I'm only asking this because I have to.
And I know you're doing your job. Because I want you to do your job. I want you to find out who did this to my life. I want to know who ruined my life.
Jenny cooperates fully, offering up DNA and fingerprint samples, even submitting to a polygraph.
I was home. I was making banana chocolate chip muffins for my kid for his birthday. I didn't do it. I mean, no, I loved him. I loved my husband.
Fueled by Jenny's grief, Knops and Petit are more than ever determined to find her husband's killer. And they start by looking at his final hours.
We looked at Dan's daily planner and where his normal whereabouts would have been on a typical day.
Jenny tells the detectives about the last time she saw her husband alive.
Take care. Love you.
Bye.
So he left about, I don't know, 8:15 before the kids went to school. He went to a meeting in Baldwin with his brother.
To find out more about Dan's morning meeting, detectives contact his brother, Mike O'Connell.
Thanks for seeing us.
My pleasure, my
Why
pleasure.
don't you tell us about that meeting?
Absolutely.
Mike tells them that Dan left the meeting early.
By retracing the last moments of the victims is how it came down to the time of the shooting for Dan and James.
All right, tomorrow night.
Records show that Dan placed an outgoing call from his office at 1:07 p.m., proving he was still alive at that time. For his part, James Ellison received a cell phone call at 1:22 p.m., which he never answered. And since the 911 call was logged at 1:40 p.m., it means that some 30 minutes remain unaccounted for. Detectives continue probing Mike for answers.
I seem to recall that he also mentioned he had a guy he had to go see in Hudson.
An encounter so important that Dan rearranged his entire schedule to accommodate the meeting.
Dan had originally set a meeting for 1 o'clock to discuss some funeral arrangements. However, he bumped that back later for 2 o'clock.
Thanks.
But who exactly was he meeting with? Knops and Petit talked to various business associates, but none can answer that question. Aware of Dan's strong professional and personal ties to St. Patrick's Church, detectives next turn to Father Ryan Erickson and any special insights he may have on the case.
You know, did anybody ever confess to you? Did anybody ever talk about the homicides to you?
Torn by his oath of secrecy, Father Erickson reluctantly reveals hearing gossip about an improper relationship between Dan and his assistant. When detectives later interview that assistant, she claims to know nothing about Dan's mystery meeting. When pressed about their relationship, she insists it was platonic, but admits her husband had a different view of things.
I guess he was A little jealous of the bond that Dan and I had, but other than that, everything was fine.
Given that fact, we thought, hey, here's a break in the case. We hadn't had a motive prior to that.
Detectives learned that her husband often checked up on them, going as far as accusing Dan of having an affair with his wife.
Hi, guys. Hey. What's going on?
Just going over some papers for the funeral.
When police interrogate the jealous husband, he denies meeting with Dan on the day of the murders, and he turns hostile and uncooperative.
In my mind, he became suspicious because he didn't want to help. Here it is, a double homicide. He knew Dan O'Connell very well, but he wasn't willing to help.
Despite having a solid alibi, the jealous husband shoots to the top of their suspect list. With the investigation in high gear, Knops and Petit attend Dan O'Connell's funeral.
It was a huge number of people, the biggest funeral we've ever had. And they were watching the funeral very closely.
The detectives are here for personal reasons, to pay their respects and mourn the loss of a friend.
I looked at the Ellison family and the O'Connell family, and I got emotional.
But they also have an ulterior motive. The killer might be among them.
A reading from the second letter of St. Paul to Timothy.
Initially, from day one, I guess I would have to say an overabundance of suspects.
It was something, you know, out of a crime novel. It just didn't make any sense, and it was very, very mysterious.
For Knops and Petit, no one is above suspicion.
The gates of paradise opened to you.
And the mystery deepens when old-fashioned police work unearths the dark and dangerous side of the local funeral business. And with it, a world of deadly obsession. The cold-blooded murders of Dan O'Connell and James Ellison stunned the small town of Hudson, Wisconsin. Family members put their faith in two rookie investigators, but their only suspect so far has an airtight alibi. And they have no other evidence to go on.
There wasn't any DNA or any of that great stuff that you look for at murder scenes. All that was not there.
Detectives Knops and Petit tirelessly re-examine every single detail in the last week of Dan's life.
They didn't look at things twice. They looked at them 3 and 5 and 6 times, and that's the thing for me, that it was a window into police work. Police work sucks. I mean, it's hard and it's dreary and it's monotonous.
While pouring through old files, the detectives discover some highly suspicious mail.
It was a threatening letter from an organization called the Rest of Jesus Ministries. It was essentially a group of people who opposed the embalming of a body.
In pseudo-biblical language, the letter accuses Dan of desecrating bodies and convinces detectives to approach the extremist Christian cult with caution. Police learn the group meets weekly to quote scripture and to hear their charismatic leader, like a prophet, speak in tongues.
The leader of the Rest of Jesus Ministries was previously arrested for stalking. We took that very seriously. In fact, that was probably one of the strongest leads that we had. So immediately we thought, hey, could this person be that radical to commit murder?
The O'Connells had received this letter from the group telling them, what you're doing is abomination.
Where there's smoke, there's usually fire. And police keep the cult leader and her followers under close surveillance. To make any charge stick, they need to place a cult member at the scene of the crime on February 5th. And while canvassing the area for eyewitnesses, they catch their break. A man driving past the funeral home at the precise time of the murders noticed something odd for a frosty February day.
He saw a gentleman in a white t-shirt, black pants, and a ball cap.
But the underdressed gentleman doesn't match any current police suspect photos.
And nothing changed, and they were frustrated. They were very frustrated.
And everything continued to lead to kind of a dead end.
We received numerous different leads on this case. Nothing that was ever really substantiated. It was more speculation. Did you look at this? Did you look at that?
I mean, they went so far, they would stop at gun ranges all the way along up to northern Wisconsin to check and see if there were shell casings that might match the gun. I know it wore on them. I know it wore on them terribly.
I was a relatively new detective, and there was a lot of talk throughout the community that these two new detectives had no chance whatsoever of solving the homicides.
This case was getting cold, it was, and that's the thing the family was afraid of.
So it got really frustrating. Not gonna lie about that. That was fairly frustrating.
Losing faith in local police, the family looks outside for help. To the TV show America's Most Wanted. The broadcast spotlights the unsolved murders and offers up an attractive reward.
The community went together, the Rotary guys and a lot of people went together to put together a pretty substantial reward fund. And there was a lot of hope that that would trigger something, money would trigger something, but it didn't.
After nearly 2 years on the case, the detectives are no closer to making an arrest.
I always told Jenny that no matter what it took, I was going to work the case, even if it took me beyond retirement.
I was scared. I didn't know who did this. I didn't know, are they gonna be after me? Am I next? Are my children next? Because I'm still looking over my shoulder.
The only thing police know for sure is that the killer is still on the loose, ready to strike again. The killing of funeral director Dan O'Connell, a respected community leader, and James Ellison, a mortuary intern, has rattled the sleepy riverside town of Hudson, Wisconsin to its very core. Nearly 2 years after the murders, police are no closer to solving the crime.
We had nobody that we could narrow down to a good, viable suspect.
Unable to get on with their lives, the victims' families are deeply frustrated, including Dan's sister, Kathy O'Connell.
I wanted to know who did this. And it wasn't because it was my brother, a dear friend, James Ellison. It was safety for my immediate family and the community.
I wondered myself if it was ever going to be solved.
Dan's sister has been pursuing the VDOC Society, a Philadelphia-based group dedicated to solving cold case homicides.
But these are like the best of the best. They're from around the world, this group of retired homicide detectives.
And they said they do not take cases unless they're cold cases, which is 2 years. So when the 2 years came up, I emailed them, I think it was midnight.
Renowned criminal profiler Richard Walter, the group's co-founder, agrees to join the investigation and travels to Hudson.
Hudson, when I arrived, was a wonderful little quaint town that it seemed almost bizarre that this could happen. In fact, I had a certain sense of an Agatha Christie sort of thing, where a great mystery in improbable circumstances took place.
Okay. Now, Richard, this is where we found the bodies.
When asked to review a crime, the very first thing I want to see is the crime scene photos.
This desk used to be over here.
I want to know what's there, what's not there, what happened, who, how many people were involved, all these other sorts of things, immediately. The crime scene, by its simplicity, then revealed there was a high investment. He wanted those people dead. But there wasn't great emotion. It seemed very purposeful in the sense that you have someone come in, shoot at an opportune time, a window of only about 15 minutes, walks out, and basically that's your crime scene.
Walter's assessment of a cold-hearted murder is backed up by the use of the gun.
The gun is detached. You don't have to touch anybody. It tells us about power.
I think that's about it. All right.
I think the challenge was the sense of mystery because there was no clear definition. Not only to try and find out who did it, but more importantly, understand why.
To bring Walter up to speed on the case, the detectives set up a war room.
My goal was to educate the police so that they could do their job. I wasn't here to replace them. I was here as a supplement. I was a technical tool. Are they seasoned homicide investigators? No. Are they good police officers with a developing talent? Yes. How can you ask for more?
You know, from Sean and Jeff's point of view, you could see in their body language and everything that they were, this was a whole new ball game now. There was a look in their eyes, there was a kind of an excitement that they hadn't had before.
No matter how unlikely, Walter considers anyone who had any connection with Dan O'Connell in the days leading up to his murder a suspect. Systematically, detectives scan their gallery of possibilities. Walter dismisses the Rest of Jesus ministry cult.
These murders were way too cold for any kind of emotional satisfaction that an Argot group would want, such as whether they threw embalming fluid on the victims, or whether they set them afire, or whether it was percussive in the sense of a strangulation, stabbing, or whatever else the case may be.
Walter is also doubtful about Knopp's and Petit's key suspect.
As a relatively new detective, I was looking at the crime scene as to what was there. When Richard Walter told me to not only look at what was there, but look at what wasn't there, that's when I started to think, you know, hey, this doesn't seem to be a jealous husband where they're gonna come in and rant and rave and knock things over. We didn't have that. There was nothing disturbed.
It would have been much a higher level of emotions. May or may not have used a gun, but it didn't really follow.
These insights convinced detectives to drop the jealous husband as a suspect.
We could not put a firearm in his hand.
Walter methodically works to eliminate all the suspects, but one.
At that point, then, the only person that could not be dismissed was Father Ryan Erickson.
Needing to know more about the priest, detectives tell Walter about Father Erickson's unique style of preaching, a style that has made him a local character.
He didn't need a microphone, and he could cry on demand. His emotions were just something else.
He was certainly different, but young and energetic. He had his detractors, but he also had a very supportive group around him as well.
But digging through old files, police discover a complaint lodged against Father Erickson. Walter's advice to the detectives is simple.
Well, follow the evidence.
The youth, now a college freshman, reveals the true nature of his complaint. That on numerous occasions, the priest had supplied him and other boys with beer and liquor.
I won't tell if you won't tell.
I mean, he gave us some beer once.
But
I mean, maybe once or twice, but that's it.
I think all of us were astounded by the fact that he had provided alcohol to young boys.
The youth then reveals something even more shocking.
We learned that Father Ryan carried out acts against parishioners by mocking that he was going to shoot them. And he would actually be up in the rectory pointing at individuals that he didn't like and actually mock that he was killing them. That's odd for anyone. It's even more odd for a priest.
For every person who finds Father Erickson peculiar and bizarre, there are those staunchly devoted to him. Detectives return to St. Patrick's to pay the holy man a visit.
We're looking for Father Erickson. Have you seen him?
Oh, didn't you hear? He got transferred to St. Mary's Church.
Father Erickson has left the parish, and investigators need to know why.
In my mind, I thought, yeah, it's possible, but a priest?
Amen.
2 years after a double homicide rocks the town of Hudson, Wisconsin, famed criminal profiler Richard Walter turns up the heat on a most unlikely suspect, a man of the cloth. Tracking Father Erickson to his new parish, some 200 miles away, detectives finally get a chance to grill the controversial priest, who, although only a pastor, arrives dressed in the full outfit of a Monsignor.
I looked at the priest and I said, young man, you're lucky I'm not in charge of this investigation, because if I were, you would not be wearing that costume. And he's taken back a little. And he said, but I'm a priest 24 hours a day. And I said, here, you're not representing the Catholic Church.
Detectives forego the alcohol complaint for now and focus on what, if anything, Erickson might know about the murders.
Hello, Father. Thank you for coming in today.
My pleasure. Anything to help the investigation?
We went in asking for his help. Has anybody said anything to you? You know, given the fact that you're tied in with the funeral home, do you speculate or do you suspect anybody?
Erickson's theory about why Dan O'Connell was murdered catches detectives off guard.
I heard that he may have had ties with the mafia.
He also gives a detailed but rambling explanation as to his whereabouts on the day of the crime.
My house, and I was driving down, I think it was York Boulevard, I think, south? No, maybe, I'm sorry, maybe I was driving.
I thought to myself, this guy can't keep his story straight. Lies change, the truth always remains the same. When we got back to the city of Hudson, we had learned that Father Ryan had already called several of his close friends and had told them that we were questioning him on the homicides and that we thought of him as a suspect.
And then he wanted me to corroborate his alibi, and I just can't lie for him. That's against my faith.
Where in fact, never once did we come out and say, hey, you're on the radar screen, you are a suspect.
And the priest's alibi continues to unravel. On that fateful day, Erickson claims to have visited the Carmelite monastery between 4 and 4:30 p.m. The nuns recall, however, that he came closer to 2:30.
Oh, yes, I am. You see, we always have a nap at 3, and he came by before that.
Their schedule is so systematic and so routine that there's no way that they can't remember it.
To me, hers was the clincher, because there's nobody more credible in the world than Sister Gemma.
Oh, yes.
But even more incriminating is what Erickson discussed with the nuns that day.
Father Ryan proceeded to tell them that there had been a horrible tragedy at the funeral home and that Dan O'Connell and his assistant had been murdered.
At that time, the ERU hadn't even cleared the funeral home. We didn't even know who it was, all in there. So how could he have known that?
Walter tells detectives to get a search warrant as fast as possible.
Shake down the directory, take all that stuff, and see what you can find.
When we went into the directory, I was surprised at the number of videos that were in there that were R-rated. But I was probably more surprised at his gun collection. He had numerous firearms, far more than I have. And the amount of swords and items of such that just didn't seem to me fit that of a priest.
I certainly would not hold it against anyone for being a gun aficionado. I think it may be a bad taste that you have your refrigerator filled with squirrels that you just shot.
Oh, God. Sean.
Police also confiscate several computers. Among the collected weapons, detectives discover semi-automatic 9mm handguns. The problem is, none match the shell casings from the crime scene.
Colt 45.
But their luck changes when it comes to the priest's computers.
Well, we really hit the jackpot with the computers.
Police discovered that Father Erickson recently installed a deleting program.
They may believe it's deleted, but for the most part, a good, proper computer forensic examination can recover all or most of that deleted file.
Stillman scans for old ghosts in the machine and uncovers 800 hidden files and 700 deleted emails.
It's almost like you're looking into their soul. It's very revealing.
Looking into the soul of Father Erickson's computer, Stillman discovers that the man has been living a bizarre double life.
The fact that he had two accounts, the admin account, the hidden secret password protected account, and the account that's open to the public, to me was very, very indicative of the double lifestyle that he had. There's emails about how he's teaching Sunday school classes and things related to the Catholic Church and things of that nature. But on the other side, there's pictures and websites showing some of the boys and young males engaged in some pretty graphic sexual scenes.
Without a doubt, this was child pornography. When we spoke to Father Ryan about the day of the homicides, he was very clear on where he was, what he did.
I was probably on my computer at the time.
But forensic science tells another story.
I built a timeline of when the computer was being used, and I told them the computer was turned off on that day. The computer wasn't even turned on. So they were very excited. The detectives were very excited about that.
With Father Erickson's alibi blown to bits by computer forensics, detectives revisit their college student witness with the hope of getting more information on the lying priest.
Quite a number of the emails were addressed to you. Is there anything you want to tell us?
I don't know what to do. I'll help you.
The youth reveals that Erickson sexually abused him on a number of occasions. Walter immediately requests another interview with the priest, who all but refuses. But a phone call to the bishop quickly puts Erickson back in the hot seat.
I may have made some poor judgment in supplying them with some alcohol, but it's just...
Come on, Father! Detectives confront Erickson with the allegations of sexual abuse. The priest admits to giving alcohol to minors, but denies the rest.
I just counsel them. I just counsel them on sex education.
Really?
Now, I may have used poor judgment to help them get ready for the future, but they have to see the dangers that await them.
And with that, I looked at him and I said, how can you be so stupid as to say that? You're a pervert.
Because his story is ever-changing, detectives grill Erickson for details about the murders. What specifically does he know?
I heard that they both had one shot to the head, or that Dan was behind his desk. I think someone told me.
And that's exactly what they were hoping to hear.
These details were never released to the public. In fact, they were kept so tight that it was even hard for our own people to explain how and why the bullet casings were where they were.
Only the detectives knew about the bullet wounds or the placement of the bodies. From retrieved shell casings, they had established that Dan was shot first. But now comes a new piece of information.
James was going in a door or going out a door.
Father Ryan had said something that nobody else had ever said. In fact, he said something to me that now described the crime scene and exactly the events that unfolded that day. What that told me that there was no way that James Ellison was in the office at the time that Dan was shot.
Erickson's comment suggests that after Dan was shot at point blank, the killer left the room and might have left the building entirely if he hadn't heard James Ellison arriving.
Dad?
The shooter came back into the doorway, shot, once, missed, got closer, and then the round into his head that killed him instantly.
Detectives and their profiler know that only one person could have told that story.
I mean, he just knew too much.
But do they have the evidence to make him pay for his sins? More than 2 years after a grisly double homicide in Hudson, Wisconsin, police finally have a prime suspect, a troubled, charismatic priest named Father Ryan Erickson. Still seeking a motive, detectives keep the pressure on Erickson, first busting his alibi and then proving he knows crime scene details never before released to the public. Initially, Erickson claims the information came from another priest, then that the details came from a Hudson police officer. He also suggests he heard them from Dan O'Connell's family.
We checked on those explanations, and they were not true.
After the second interview, Erickson agrees to take a polygraph, then backs out on advice from a state public defender. A few days later, with police moving closer to an arrest, Erickson takes matters into his own hands. Richard Walter recalls a prophetic statement made by Father Erickson near the end of their last interview.
He was asked what should happen to the person who committed these murders. And he said they should commit suicide.
As soon as I had learned that he was dead, in my mind, I thought, yes, he is the one that killed Dan and James.
Following the priest's death, the wall of silence that once protected him starts to crumble.
People were afraid to come forward. The fact that he was a priest, I believe, helped him get away with this for so long.
In the end, a witness comes forward and hands police the final key to their mystery.
Afraid I don't know what you're talking about, Daniel.
A few days before the murders, the witness overheard Father Erickson arguing with Dan O'Connell.
It's over. Daniel!
The motive that we came up with was that Dan O'Connell was going to be the whistleblower on Ryan Erickson for his sexual acts with juveniles. James Ellison just happened to be an innocent bystander.
My first thought was, oh my God. I trusted that man. I welcomed him into my home. I trusted him. He was my priest. And he had enough nerve to come to my home to console me, console my family, console my children, preside, over a funeral, and do a reading, and not be remorseful at all. It's like, what kind of a monster are you?
Gathering all necessary proof, a hearing is held on October 3rd, 2005. Faced with overwhelming evidence, a judge concludes with no hesitation that Father Ryan Erickson is guilty of both murders.
3 years of hell, but it was over. I know who did it, and I knew why.
Dan was the type of person that stood up for what was right. I think ultimately that's what cost Dan O'Connell his life.
He was actually being the humanitarian he was. He was defending children.